What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip. And guess what? Today on Homebrewed Christianity, we have a visit from JC himself, Jack Caputo. And you may say to yourself, whoa, Trip, Jack Caputo, he's probably been on this podcast 15 times over the years. He has. But this episode is like none other. How is that? Two reasons. Number one, this is a part of the process, this series on artificial intelligence. Jack Caputo could be on here unpacking Derrida, the nature of deconstruction, looking at philosophy and culture and all that kind of stuff. Normally, we get going and go all sorts of directions. This one is about humanity, technology, artificial intelligence. So this is a different vibe, different question, different orientation, you say. But there's another reason this one's going to be different. Like none other, it's because I outsourced the hosting microphone to my partner in the Process This Artificial Intelligence series, Kester Brewin. That's right, author of Godlike, just came out, great books, you should get it, is talking with Jack Caputo. And this is why this conversation is completely different than the one I would have had with Caputo, even though I would love talking to Caputo, because they're both radical theologians. This is a chance to hear that radical theological perspective and what does it sound like when two of them get going, get vibing, get working around artificial intelligence. You'll also have heard Mike Morelli's reflection on Jacques Ellul and what does that kind of tradition look like. Coming up, you'll hear from Ilia Dilio and how like Teilhard and Whitehead, what does that tradition look like when thinking about artificial intelligence? That's what we're doing with this series. As part of the Process This Artificial Intelligence series. You get to hear from multiple theological and philosophical perspectives and what do they highlight about humanity's relationship to technology, the challenge questions that come up when it goes to artificial intelligence. And it's not just that. You're also getting to hear from scientists, ethicists, scholars of religion, lawmakers. I mean, it is an interdisciplinary explosion of fun. Well, you know, if you're the kind of person that likes to nerd out with their geek out, which you're kind of selected that way because you hit play on this. You know what I mean? And if you want to get ad-free versions of all the podcasts, get the extended edition on the ones that go along for members, or have access to the over 45 classes that we've done at Homebrewed Christianity, then you should head over to homebrewedcommunity.com. You can join the Substack there or join up for theologyclass.com, which is our learning management platform for all the classes. And when you join up there, you also get the Substack and all the membership benefits there too. And this is probably a good time to say one of the classes over at theologyclass.com is with Jack Caputo. It's called Theology of Culture. We look at Derrida, Mary Daly, Paul Tillich. Yeah, it's a good one. James Cone. It's an exploration of theology of culture with that radical tradition at its heart. And that's just one of them you get access to encounter, experience whenever you want. Homebrewedcommunity.com, the place to go. Now, prepare yourself for Kester's cool accent, radical theological questions as he talks to JC himself, Jacques Caputo. Smoochy boochies, friends.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Process This series that Trip and I are doing on AI and theology and all the kind of stuff around that, partly inspired by my book, Godlike, a 500-year history of artificial intelligence. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have Professor John Caputo, Jack, here with us, who has been an enormous inspiration for my work and a wonderful figure in the whole kind of movement of philosophy, theology, and particularly for those of us who've been interested in the kind of radical edges of that. Jack kindly sent me his book, Spectres of God, which has got some fantastic stuff thinking about AI and transhumanism, and that's what we want to get into today. So welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much, Kester. It's great to be here.
I think the last time that we spoke was at Greenbelt Festival over in the UK, and
in the mud.
In the mud. We certainly got into the mud in that festival experience. Maybe we'll get deeper into the mud in this, into the swamp of AI. Yeah. you've had an extraordinary kind of journey. You spent time in the religious life as, I think it was Brother Jonathan, as an academic focusing on religion and then on philosophy, and then perhaps as an alloy of both of those, focusing on theology, whatever that might mean. So why should people who are interested in things of the spirit care about the rise of AI?
When I began my life, my career, my profession, my first move was to enter a Catholic religious order because I was quite seriously Catholic. I wasn't conservative Catholic necessarily, but I was devoutly Catholic. And in those days, I mean, that was the early 1960s, we were all interested in Thomas Aquinas. And I wrote my master's thesis on Thomas Aquinas' Angelology. That was a sign of how devoutly Catholic I was. I was very interested. I was very interested in angels. And I was interested in angels for partly because they actually are the keystone of Aquinas' metaphysics. If he can explain what angels are, in order to explain what angels are, he's got to be able to explain the difference between finite and infinite and material and immaterial, because angels are finite, pure spirits. And
Yeah.
how does that work? Okay, so it turns out to be a keystone of his metaphysics. But I was also fascinated by the idea of angels because I was interested in mysticism and mystical unity and the limits of rationality. And angels, it turns out, have these supremely perfect intellects. They're not infinite, but they're perfect, pure intellects capable of instant knowledge, the instant transmission of knowledge on an immaterial substrate in beings who do not perish, whose task in creation is communication. Okay? So now I'm writing this book, and this is my master's thesis, 1962. I have no idea, like anyone else, no idea about AI or anything like it. And later on, a French philosopher named Michel Serres wrote a book called La Légende des Anges, the Legend of Angels. Got translated into English under a bad title, Angels, a Mythology. And he constructs this beautiful, interesting, fascinating analogy between angelic intelligence, AI, and AI. And not just AI, but modern technology itself. And I thought, oh my God, that is brilliant. And personally, it brought together my master's thesis and my interest in Thomas Aquinas with what's going on now. And angels really are sort of model AI worlds, beings, entities. There's a thing there in the mystical tradition, in the religious tradition, which has to do with transcending our limits, acquiring unity with God, imperishability, intelligibility, light, truth, instantly. And Thomas said their communication systems travel at the speed of thought.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know anything about the speed of light, right? I think that they belong to the same, what I would call the same imaginary.
Yeah.
Angels and AI and spirit and specters. So the name of that book, Specters of God, was a play on, of course, on Jacques Derrida's Specters of Marx.
So the title of my book actually was inspired by someone from entirely the other side of the spectrum, the UK government's head of AI safety, who is interestingly, I've only just made this connection. They would call him an angel investor, someone who serially comes in at the beginning and puts investment into kind of tech companies, but an engineer, an entrepreneur, and he wrote a piece for the Financial Times in April 2023 saying we should pause the race to godlike AI. And I was like, hold on a moment. In what sense do you mean this? And of course, you look back, as I do in the book, the kind of language of the spirit has been used by technologists since time immemorial. And of course, the iPhone is this angelic thing that we carry with us around with us the whole time. Now, you mentioned Derrida, and at the beginning of Spectres, there's this fantastic quote from him saying, "I think that the future belongs to ghosts, that technology increases greatly the power of ghosts." So why do you think Derrida considered technology to be a kind of haunting of us?
Oh, he did. He did. That's the spectrality of it. He was being interviewed. There was a film. They were doing a film about him. He was being interviewed, and this young, apparently lovely young actress is interviewing him, and he's playing himself in this film. She says, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And he says, "Well," he says, "right now I'm becoming a ghost. Right? We're making a film. We're making a virtual image. We're creating specters, and it will, long after I'm dead, you will be able to listen to me and hear me." And then he says to her, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And she says, "Yes, I think I do now." Well, the young woman died about 2 or 3 years later. She was just in her early 20s. He's in a conference, and they play this film, and they replay that scene, and they replay the scene where he says to her, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And she says, "I think I do now."
Yeah.
And he says, "Ooh, where is she now?" So, I mean, it's a very, very, very. This is 1980, right? This is like
Wow.
1980. He's saying all this. His thought turns on a debate. It started out in a debate with Husserl, on the father of phenomenology, where Husserl said all of our signs, all of our words, all of our images are oriented teleologically towards fulfillment. And so he distinguished empty signs and fulfilled signs. And so I've never been to Moscow, but I have an idea of what Husserl would call an empty intention of Moscow, but it's not fulfilled until I actually walk the streets. Derrida says, no. The function of a sign, the power of a sign, is its capacity to operate in the absence of the signified.
Yeah.
Because it releases the sign from the prison house of presence. Okay? So this critique of presence that he undertakes is not because he's against reality, but because he's interested in the emancipatory effects of images and of representations, the liberation of the sign from the bonds of presence. Now, he's at that point talking about the technology of speech and writing. Okay, so he's saying, he's already challenging the idea that humans are a pure spirit. He's saying that they depend upon a technology, which is a coded system of signifiers. And he says that coded system of signifiers works even better when it's written down, because then it can be passed on across space and time. And so writing became a figure for him of the emancipation of our thinking from the prison house of what's immediately present.
Yeah.
And that's the possibility, that creates the possibility of the work of art, of any kind of imaginative creation. It releases us from the narrowness of now and allows us to recover the past and release itself to the future, open itself to the future. And that natural capacity of doing that in speech and writing is, in our age, enhanced beyond our comprehension by the new technologies. I think the future belongs to these virtual realities.
And interestingly, the kind of, I suppose, up-to-date version of that, as he is talking, being interviewed by that woman, I was listening to a piece on our midday news today where survivors of the Holocaust have been captured on video, hundreds of hours of recordings, and that's all gone into an AI model that school children can interact with by asking live questions, and that then processes and constructs their answers out of the things that they've said, so that their testimony will live on forever. In a much more kind of, low art way, I suppose. I think it's the actor Bruce Willis has sold his entire image rights so that he will be able to be featuring in films for time immemorial. which is great if you're a Bruce Willis fan in some ways, but in other ways, it's kind of strange in terms of what's that doing for young actors who maybe want to be the next Bruce Willis. And now, well, we've always got Bruce Willis, and it will constantly be him acting
Yeah.
for a very small amount of processing time. The film will become quite cheap to have Bruce Willis star in it, but starring as his own ghost in perpetuity. So these are very, very live questions that Derrida seemed to understand from a long time ago through the medium of television and film, even before we were generating.
He wrote about and spoke about television. He died 4 years before the first rollout of an iPhone.
Incredible.
So he's just one of these guys, a seminal figure. But what he calls deconstruction and that movement, that sort of has come and gone.
Yeah.
But he's like the great thinkers. He's just planted things that just have grown.
And one of the other great thinkers is Heidegger, who I know you wrote your first book on, I think, on mysticism in Heidegger, and he wrote, the question concerning technology, which is a fabulous book in the 50s, I think. Why do you think his philosophy of technology might be important for the times we're in so many years later after he'd finished writing?
Yeah, he's an ambiguous figure in this thing. But one thing, by the way, is in 1956 he singled out the English word information, and he said, "I don't like this word. This word is dangerous. Watch out for this. This is."
I did not know that.
Talk about intuitive insight.
Yeah.
Well, Heidegger, on the one hand, was a great genius who saw the advent of technology and the what he called the inframing grip of technology on our world. It's affecting our understanding of being. It is how we understand being, and he saw that largely as a threat rather than the New Age. He was a conservative reactionary, and of course he's most notorious for his National Socialism.
Yes.
But he had great insight into the sort of grip that technology has on us. So he didn't think that technology was an instrument that we could use for good or for ill. He didn't think we were in control of it. He thought it was in control of us. And so he called it, the way they translate the German word, he called it the inframing, the thing that has got us before, it has us before we have it. So on the one hand, it's reactionary. His view of technology is reactionary. It's almost antediluvian. He was against typewriters. I have a letter from him, by the way.
Oh.
When I was a graduate student, or not a graduate student, I was a young professor. I wrote to him, and I had a connection. And he answered me, but he answered me with a typewritten letter, which I thought was really funny because he was against typewriters. So that's antediluvian on that, from that point of view. But he had a vision of the danger, and he called it the danger of the Gestell, what he calls. And his reaction to it was romanticism, a kind of romanticism. But it was precious because romanticism is precious, because he loved the Black Forest, he loved the natural world, and he was terrified by that. And one of the things that scared the daylights out of him was the picture taken by one of the Apollo trips from the moon of the Earth. And he said the objectification of the Earth. Now the Earth is an object. It's not the Earth on which we walk, but it's this object of technological inspection. Ambiguous. He's ambiguous.
Yeah. It was William Anders who took that photograph in 1968, and he died just a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Oh, really?
Perhaps the most important photograph ever taken. I talk about this in my book, Getting High, because interestingly, NASA had to be persuaded to turn the camera around. They were, they'd gone to the moon, so there were lots of kind of forward focusing, looking at, taking photographs of the moon, and it was a young kind of LSD freak called Stuart Brand who was in California selling these little button badges saying, why haven't we seen a photo of the whole Earth yet? And he kind of created this mass movement among the hippies to try and persuade NASA to do that. And that's what William Anders did. He turned around and took a photo of the Earth. And of course, perhaps the most important thing that the Apollo missions did was not discover the moon, but discover the Earth. And I wonder whether in our huge spurt of creativity and engineering now, where we're creating this extraordinary thing out here of AI, whether it might help us to understand actually ourselves better, that it will, even though it's focused out there, perhaps it will be one of those great moments where we understand actually it's going to teach us more about ourselves. And in the book, you talk about, well, maybe we've never asked whether we're ever been human, and perhaps this will help us to do so.
Yeah, for example, one of the Heidegger was spooked by that question. So in this language we're using, he was spooked. He called it unheimlich, right? Uncanny.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you look back at that and you say, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So precious. So it's telling us about our home. And one of the really interesting things about what's going on right now is we're beginning to leave home, right? We're beginning to Kant said that defined enlightenment as the adulthood of humankind. And, it's outgrown the tutelage of the church and the king. Well, in a way, that's what's happening right now. We're leaving our family and home. We're beginning to take leave of the earth, and we're beginning to take leave of our biological limits.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah, this is telling us something about ourselves, and on the one hand, it's telling us what a fragile piece of luck we are in this incredibly James Webb telescope view of the universe. I think, and this is a point that Ilia Delia was talking about. I think, and Donna Haraway does this too. She says it's breaking down the distinctions that we have lived by. The distinction between human and non-human, artificial and natural, matter and spirit. And if by human we mean this biologically based rational being planted forever in a geocentric universe, well, then in a certain sense, we've never been human in that sense. We are a piece of evolution. And what we've been calling human is just a flash, freeze frame picture of a history that began 300,000 years ago, or however old they say our species is, and is headed who knows where. And if being human has to do with some kind of real separation from the rest of the biological universe and natural universe, then we've never been human. And artificial intelligence systems are advanced versions and artificial versions of what we are. And so, what is the real distinction between natural and artificial? What's artificial about anything made by human beings?
Yeah. So interestingly,
that's our nature.
Yeah. And you mentioned there about going beyond the biological, and you talk in the book about Ray Kurzweil, who the fantastic keyboard maker, who I talk about in the book as well. And there's a fantastic documentary that was made about him called Transcendent Man, which is on YouTube. And in that he says, people ask me, does God exist? And I say, not yet. And this is the not yet for him is about genuinely exploring the possibility of being able to upload himself as a kind of digital online consciousness and leave the human body behind in this Moravec transfer that you talk about, this upload within the book. I mean, if he were able to succeed in doing that, in what sense would he have succeeded in becoming godlike? Or in what sense would he have succeeded in becoming perfectly human.
Yeah, I mean, he would be like Jesus says, living like the angels. That's it's this angelic model, and the Greek word that we're translating as angels in some of these texts is actually just a word for divinities.
Yeah,
I mean, another way to translate it is divinities in the plural, meaning beings who are imperishable and super intelligent and imperishable, and that's been a dream of humankind. I mean, and it's been thought of as something you acquire after death,
yeah,
becoming divine. And Saint Athanasius said, God became human in Christ in order that humans may become divine in and through Christ. And technology is saying, well, that's a good idea.
yeah.
But we don't need Christ for that. What we need is technology. So there's an aspiration for it's a kind of limit concept, a concept of super intelligent, imperishable being has always been a kind of, and angels were the form of that imaginary until today.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Kurzweil is right about that. That is not yet. Whether it can be done, and whether if when you're done, what you've got is a super intelligent being, but not is it conscious? That's the David Chomp. Something could be. You could have a super intelligent computer, but what's to say it's conscious?
So the interesting thing here is, and this is where AI has always kind of split apart right from its earliest days about whether it is going to augment us and go the kind of full Kurzweil model of we upload ourselves as a digital consciousness, or actually what seems to be happening more is that we are creating ourselves a machine that is functionally angelic, but is not, within it doesn't have our consciousness, as it were. And that could then function as a kind of overlord because it is a machine that we are creating that is separate from us. So are we ending up then potentially being in a situation where we create something godlike and then lose control of it and end up regretting that? And in a sense,
Yeah.
The most godlike thing we do is to create something that we then lose control of and then regret.
And that's the ancient objection to technology, right? That is, remember the essay that Derrida wrote many, many years ago on the pharmacon. And he's telling the story, Plato's telling the story of the invention of writing.
Yeah.
And the inventor presents it to the king, and he says, I have this wonderful new invention which will extend memory.
Yeah.
And the king says, no, because we learn things by heart, right? And you're going to destroy our heart and transfer it to techne, to this technology. So that objection is as old as Plato, and it's always it is the poison cure.
Yeah.
It's the way the Ford pharmacon gets translated by Derrida. Poison cure. That's true of AI. It is true of nuclear power. It's true of technology, contemporary technology, to the nth degree. And what Plato was worried about is nothing compared to what we're concerned with now. Destroying our environment, destroying our species. And then even if we don't do those two things, inventing something that we can't control, that runs out of control. So my attitude towards that is I am not a techno-optimist. I mean, there's a line in Spectres of God where I said that dinosaurs weren't replaced by bigger and better dinosaurs. So it's completely possible for a species to just destroy itself or get destroyed. I'm not a techno-optimist, but I also don't want to be antediluvian. I don't want to be like Heidegger. I don't want to just simply fear this thing. And so what I find it exciting and terrifying all at once. And I think that we are on the edge of extraordinary invention and extraordinary discovery and exploration, so as we don't kill ourselves.
And this is why, because of the magnitude of where we're at, I've been very keen, as you know, and this was the motivation for writing the book, and others have chimed in, that actually we need those who have got the language of the largest things to be able to help us to deal with it. That's why I think, you know, theologians and philosophers are central to every debate about AI. And if we leave it to the engineers or just the economists, you know, we're in grave, grave danger, actually. And it strikes me that maybe this is what theology has been working towards all this time, is how to then deal with the invention of these large language models, you know, and the whole kind of Promethean thing and the explosion of the word and what have you. So this kind of marrying together finally of AI and religion as well. I mean, you say in the book, AI is not the problem and religion is not the solution. It's only the failure of religion as it presently exists that tempts us to turn to technology. And it's, you know, as you say, the two must find each other for the good of the whole earth. I'd love you to expand on that, about how AI and religion actually need to complete one another, which is really what I've been trying to argue for.
Well, first thing I want to say is that I looked that up, and I checked that out when you sent me that question, and I was quoting Ilya.
You were, yeah. So apologies for simplifying.
But I was quoting it. I was endorsing it. I was saying, right on. The thing that has always interested me since I was a novice in a Catholic religious order was the mystical, and the relationship between rational thinking and the mystical. And by the mystical, I don't mean, you know, levitations and communications with celestial beings, and I don't mean anything like that. I mean our consciousness of classical mysticism, our consciousness of unity with God. And by God, I mean not a super being, a being somewhere, but a symbol of, the way I like to put it, quoting, and again, here I'm using Derrida again, what Derrida calls the possibility of the impossible. I think that's kind of a limit notion for us, to think the unthinkable, to desire something with a desire beyond desire. So there's this moment of principle of excess. Systems can't or shouldn't be allowed to close. They should always be open-ended in a kind of optimal disequilibrium. Our horizons are necessary in order to have orientation, but horizons need to be shattered.
Yes.
Like the Kuhn's notion of paradigm shifts. Copernicus's idea of, he didn't discover any new stars. He just said, stop thinking like that and start thinking this way. Think the impossible, not in the sense of a logical contradiction, but in the sense of something that shatters the current horizon of possibility.
Yeah.
Now, I think the idea of God is a focus imaginarius for that. I think that's what the idea of God, as it has evolved historically in the Abrahamic traditions. If you go outside the Abrahamic traditions, it's all completely different. But the way that name functions for us, I think, is as this principle of excess, this limit concept, the possibility of the impossible. Now, that means that reason, you don't. If you're interested in mysticism, you ought not to become an anti-rationalist. You ought to have a supple understanding and plastic idea of rationality. So that reason is what Schelling called ecstatic. That is, breached. Thinking is breached by the unprethinkable. That's always already there. So there's a fundamental, embedded, structural, in principle excess that thinking seeks but can't achieve. And that doesn't defeat thinking, that impels thinking, it generates thinking. So I see the sort of deep concept or central concept for me when I think about all this is the notion of the Mysterium, Tremendum et Fascinans. Otto's definition of that depiction of the divine.
Yeah.
Now, I think the notion of the Mysterium, this Mysterium, Tremendum et Fascinans, is irreducible. And I think that the more that reason expands, the more that we get to know, the deeper the mystery.
Yes.
So if you think of religion in terms of the place where we cultivate this, create a zone of respect for the mystery of being and the mystery of our lives. And then you see technology as just one more effort of human beings to think the unthinkable, to explore the unencompassable. Then the Galileo probe, the Apollo missions, the James Webb Telescope is telling us about the unencompassable,
Yeah.
and is opening our eyes to a mystery beyond imagining. So Spinoza's old thing about Deus sive natura is sort of being realized, I think.
Yes.
And natura is a lot more than Spinoza thought. It is not this, it's not this sort of Newtonian determinist system. It's quite, particularly when you look at quantum physics, of the smallest now, not the largest. The quantum physicists are saying, we don't know what the hell this is. We're just doing the calculations and doing the science and doing the experiments, and we're going to try not to think about what this is, because when you try, it doesn't make sense. And I love that. So I think religion is the home of the Mysterium, and religion and science come together on that point. That's why you need humanists in the room when you're doing these things.
One of the things I try and cover in the book is how that kind of true religion, or that true idea of technology as a tool that is open to all to increase the mystery, is complicated by the fact that AI is dominated by 4 or 5 major companies who are therefore introducing, and I kind of use the word carefully in the book, but a kind of satanic Lucifer, an oppositional empire structure, which distorts this idea by presenting to us a technology or a technological promise that we are going to be augmented by this use, or we are going to be expanded. But actually, the reverse is true, and the information flows, we are subservient to it. We are giving over our kind of inputs and data and allowing them to become more magisterial or whatever. So I wonder how you see, whether it's the market or the great oppressor or kind of empire structures that have influenced the way that religion interacts with people through time, whether you see those similar questions of those forces distorting things away from that wonderful vision that you've just expounded.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm not a techno optimist. I mean, the most vivid and palpable experience of the downside of all this is going on as we speak today, because this evening there's going to be a presidential debate in which an honest but aging man is going to have a debate with the Prince of Lies.
Yes.
I mean, if you want a Prince of Lies, there's the Prince of Lies. And the technology has so badly manipulated the debate and the public discourse that we really are in a world that Plato was afraid of, which is where the distinction between reality and appearance has disappeared. And nobody believes anything. Nobody trusts anybody. When you open your mouth, you can't assume that when someone else opens their mouth, you can't assume they're speaking the truth.
Yeah.
That's where we've gotten to, and technology has done that. I mean, they've taken images of Biden, spliced them, and made him look like he was bumbling around on stage, lost, and didn't know where he was going. And somebody had to help him back into the group to continue the conversation. This was when he was at the G7 a week or two ago.
Yeah.
So the most palpable experience I have right now is the complete degradation of political discourse in the United States and probably the rest of the world. But here, this democracy is circling the drain right now because of information technologies.
So
Yeah.
where I try and get to in the book is to say, how do we counter that?
Yeah.
And, slightly tongue in cheek, I say, well, the best way to counter it is for everyone to go back to church. Because, these gatherings in person of, 150 people where you are known, but you're experiencing otherness, it is a place in which trust and transparency, and yet your sense of it, of being expanded, is going to be reinforced. And that perhaps what we need to do, not to be totally rejecting technologies, but to be in communities of understanding where we reflect quite deeply on our technology use and make decisions about them. And I say, look, you can criticize the Amish all you like, but at least they made a decision. They still wear clothes. They just, they don't use zips. They use buttons. They're making decisions, and actually those decisions are going to be very important for all of us. But we need to do that at the kind of meso level structure, not at the individual structure, or just, high up here at the nation level. We've got to have those communities of practice in the middle. And I wonder whether, that kind of sense of the gathering is something that you have felt, would be kind of good in terms of that experience of what you come towards, that axiology towards the end, of doing something worthy of us.
I mean, the problem is, yes. I mean, that's exactly we need a new we need a new Saint Benedict. We need a new monasticism. We need new communities of love. The problem is the churches have been corrupted.
Yeah.
Right. To find a community to find a community like that, you have to look hard, because religion tends now to be a feature of the undereducated, and it's disappearing among educated people. It's flourishing, but it's flourishing in rural, uneducated, reactionary, poor America, and the so-called elite are thought to be the enemies of religion. Now, I mean, that's a painting with broad strokes, but it's largely true. I mean, the kinds of groups that you speak to and that I speak to, the kinds of religious organizations that, I mean, I don't do a whole lot of lecturing now. I do Zoom stuff. But when I would get invited by religious communities to speak, that's exactly the kind of people I was preaching to the converted. I mean, these were people who were low on doctrine, very high on community and mutual support and service.
Yeah.
And proxies, theoproxies. Yes, that's exactly the sort of thing we need. I'm finishing up a book right now, and the first sentence is, the basic question is, does religion do more harm than good? And I said, my standard answer to that is, it depends on what day you ask me. And right now, I think it does more harm than good. I am not sure we can save it. Religion isn't going to save anybody, but we need to save religion. One of the reasons I am interested in AI and the new technologies is, apart from what I just said, that sort of idealist view of it. One of the things is that I have an instinctive distrust of religious reactionaries and of reacting against technology and against science. I mean, we are in a position right now, and I'm sure you are too in England, of trying to defend science.
Yes.
Trying to defend vaccinations. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So, and that's in no small part religion's fault, and the manipulation of religion by people with power and money.
So it seems to me that, and going back to this idea of information as this extraordinary and perhaps dangerous word. I mean, we've got access to far more information, but far less wisdom and understanding. And it would seem to me that the kind of intersection of AI and religious understanding has kind of brought together that perfect storm of, we've got all this information, and yet the things that we end up believing are so extraordinarily poor. So how do we put that right? I mean, in what sense do we take this great technology of vast information, but try and somehow direct it towards better knowledge and understanding.
Well, I mean, you're going to get a very leftist answer from me, and that is you need public programs supported by the federal government, which will provide for universal and fair education and healthcare and the support of poor families. I mean, the reason rural America is, I refer to them as undereducated, not stupid or ignorant.
Yeah.
They're no smarter or dumber than the rest of us. They're just simply undereducated, right? And they're also underserved in terms of their health care, so that their rural communities are prone to drug use. And the young people leave because they see no future there, and there is no future there. So if you had strong, powerful public programs that supported health and education, you could lift the veil of ignorance. And I mean, I honestly think, I mean, it's my prejudice as an intellectual, as a university professor, I honestly think the answer is education. The answer is if people simply understood what a vaccine was, and understood science, and they understood religion, and didn't mystify it. They understood that religion was a kind of what I like to call nowadays theopoetics. It's a way of poetizing the mystery of our lives in telling stories and striking images and wondrous events, like happens in literature. If they understood what religion was, they understood what science was, if they just were educated, if they could read and write and think, and that we were going in that direction at one point, and then neoliberalism set in, and there's nothing that money can't corrupt, and it corrupts everything. It corrupts sports, it corrupts education, it corrupts religion, it corrupts everything,
and it's going to corrupt AI.
And it's going to corrupt AI. Yes. So if you ask me to predict the future, I would have a very pessimistic view of what's going to happen. I have a very pessimistic view of what's going to happen to this country. And if we lose this election, I just...
It is going to be a complex space. Yeah.
Yeah. If I didn't have children and grandchildren, I would just say, to hell with it.
Yeah.
But it's... Yeah, so factually, predictively, I think that we are in troubled waters. But the idea of science and technology and religion, it's only bad ideas of religion, and as Ilya says, bad ideas of religion and the misuse of technology that pits them against each other. They shouldn't. They belong together.
Yeah, you are more optimistic in the end of the book, where you talk about the ruinology and then you talk about this axiology. And I wonder if we could just finish up by you kind of outlining that idea that we do something worthy of us, as you say, in that kind of axiology. And I wonder if there is a way in which we can lean towards our understanding of technology as at each moment, whether that's an individual level, at a firm level, at a kind of policy level, of creating something that is worthy of us. And if you could outline your kind of more optimistic view through that kind of that prism of the axiology at the end of Specters of God.
First of all, the word axiology is a standard piece of philosophy, which just simply means value theory.
Yeah.
But Heidegger says, well, it's a lot more than that. If you go back to the original word axios, from which you get both geometric axioms as well as ethical values, he says the word axios means something that inherently commands our respect. Yeah. Something that it's not a product of our valuing it, but it's the other way around. It commands our respect, and so we value it because of itself.
Yes,
its commanding aspect. And so then there's a line in Gilles Deleuze in The Logic of Sense where he says, he defines ethics as making ourselves worthy, axios, making ourselves worthy of the events that happen to us.
Yes.
Which is really beautiful. This is genuinely beautiful understanding of human existence. Making ourselves worthy of the things that happen to us. And Well, you know this pale blue dot thing of
Yeah.
Carl Sagan? I love that.
Yeah.
And that's another picture, right? It's this. In case anybody doesn't know what that is this picture taken by, it was the Galileo probe, right?
Or one of the
It was
Voyager probes. I can't remember. Yeah.
The Voyager probe that was
Family photo of. Yeah.
out on the edge of the solar system, which took a picture from there, in which there's this big stream of light crossing the galaxy, and this teeny little dot. And Carl Sagan says, "That's us.
Yeah.
That's us. That's everybody who's ever lived. All the heroes, all the villains, all the kings, all the paupers, all the lovers, all the lying politicians. Everybody. That's us."
Yeah.
And he says that makes us appreciate our fragility in the universe. And he says it should make us cherish this pale blue dot, as he called it, and deal with one another more kindly.
Absolutely.
Deal with one another more kindly. Now, that I think is a poetic, scientific, what I like to call cosmo-theo-poetic vision of our lives.
Yeah.
That we are commissioned by the stars to cherish this world, to deal more kindly with one another. And that extraordinary science intensifies that. So it's no longer our imaginary has to change. It is changing. There's we don't have any choice about it. From the sort of geocentrism and even heliocentrism to a sense of a cosmic awareness of the mystery of things. And so I think the axiology and the science come together.
And that's probably a great place to summarize and finish, in that Sagan, rather like Stuart Brand in 1968, had to spend quite a long time persuading NASA to turn the probe around to take that photograph, because it would take a little bit of energy, it would take a little bit of fuel, to turn the probe around to do that. And again, I think perhaps we could summarize by saying, look, we are pushing ahead into great new realms on the edges of our experience and of our horizon. But one of the things perhaps we need to do is to spend that energy to turn around and to look at one another at the human level, at the earth scale, as it were, in order that we might find that kindness to one another, and that to use the extraordinary mystery of these great machines and systems that we are building to actually act as a motivation and an energizer for our rehumanizing of our experience and our sense of who we are as one another. So thank you so much, Jack, for taking the time. And it's been really, really inspiring hearing your enormous universe focus itself onto this problem of AI.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's great to see you, and keep up this great work. I'm really looking forward to receiving your book. Amazon says it's coming today. It's an Amazon news.
The algorithm is will serve us well. Yeah. All right. Yes. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Well, you know what that means? That means you're awesome. You and all the cool kids do like yourself, they share the brew, because the best brew is a shared brew. So share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. If you love it, if you dig it, or if you go, whoa, I got a question I'd like to engage, then you should head over to the Substack. That is the easiest place to interact, reflect, connect, meet other people, send me your questions and feedback. And also, if you love it and you want to make it possible, then go to homebrewcommunity.com and you can find the ways to support the podcast, connect with community, and get access to over 45 plus classes we've done over the years. If you want to hang out in person. then come to Theology Beer Camp. October 17th and 19th in Denver, Colorado. theologybeer.camp. That's the URL. Come on out and nerd out with your geek out in the flesh.